A lot of us might not really feel connected to the story of China's currency becoming ubiquitous. If we had a digital currency on a day to day, like what might that look like? Hi, I'm Natalia Talker, and today we're going to be talking about a central bank issued digital currency and why that's important for the US to invest in. So, digital currencies, and especially a central bank issued one, is sort of like programmable digital money that is centrally authored by the central bankers themselves. It's stable because it's pegged to the dollar or whatever currency that the central bank usually issues. But I think the biggest part of a central bank issued digital currency is that it's not necessarily going to be linked to a bank account. Today, when we use Apple Pay or when we use Venmo, all of that money is money that is linked to our bank account. With the central bank digital currency, you have a digital wallet on your phone. So as long as you have a cell phone and access to the internet, you have the authority to hold a central bank digital currency on your digital mobile wallet. I think there's a lot of amazing components of a digital currency that could actually change the everyday life of a single American. First of all, you're not having to go to a bank when you get paid. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes waiting for like the end of the second week to come is hard, and it takes a few days for things to transfer to your bank account. As soon as you would get paid, you would get it almost instantaneously. Store checkouts might be seamless, like feel more like walking into an Amazon grocery store and walking out. A lot of people think that it needs to completely replace the other forms of cash that we use, and that's definitely not the case. People will still want to use credit cards. There still might be physical cash. It's adding to the ecology of money, and in the future will hopefully be more ubiquitous, but it'll be sort of a process. It's not like overnight we're all going to move to this digital currency and people are not going to have an idea of how to work things. You could actually program incentives to help people spend during a recession so that the economy could somewhat still stay afloat. So you could program direct cash rebates, you could program negative interest rates where people would actually get charged if they held on to money for too long. And because it's programmable, you can actually mitigate long-term structural risk to the economy because you can easily switch that on and off. A lot of the reason we have such high fees when we're transferring interbank and across borders is because it's actually very expensive for the banks themselves to be moving that money. But if that cost goes down for them, then they are probably going to be more willing to also drive the cost down for consumers. And it's a better value add for both parties. So as we even think about this in relation to China, just as President Obama's Trans-Pacific Partnership sought to tie developing economies of Southeast Asia closer to the US, China is actually using the digital yuan to connect those same nations to Beijing through a digital infrastructure used by hundreds of millions of people. This would actually give the Chinese government access to payment data, surveillance of not just their own citizens, but the citizens of other countries using their digital currency. And some of these other countries in Southeast Asia are also the US's trade partners. So there's actually a big loss of economic influence that could extend. This is also not only an economic concern, but this is also a national security concern. And so what does that mean? Well, the US currently extends economic sanctions against regimes in nations like North Korea and Iran, and those sanctions depend on the use of the dollar for global trade and the purchase of goods. But if North Korea and Iran start to operate on Chinese infrastructure using the digital yuan, then the US and EU authorities would be blind to any economic activity in these countries, so we can no longer account for them. I think right now, when we think about the hurdles for the US to overcome, there is sort of like a paralysis in regulator decision making. I feel like this is mostly kind of attributed to the fact that you can't jump into policy making without actually understanding the design and technology considerations that you would want to deploy in a central bank digital currency. There's a lot of different questions that regulators need to be asking themselves. If we can develop small sandboxes where you can actually test this technology, then that will actually transfer very well to policymakers actually being able to create the policy around it. When I think about the future of a world with digital currency, I think there's a lot of opportunity to have a more financially inclusive system where sending and receiving money is almost effortless, is cheap, is fast, and money is something that people like to interact with, and it's a way for government and different organizations to engage citizens and consumers in new ways. And so while we might be behind China, I think the call to action is that we need to come to the table and have these conversations and make these decisions around the design elements and test the technology in closed environments so that we can eventually make policy around it and eventually start testing it in broader portions of the United States.